January 19th, 1981. At Chicago Theater, Bob Marley stopped mid-concert when a man everyone thought died in Jamaica walked onto stage, carrying proof that would destroy everything. The temperature outside was -12. Inside the Chicago Theater, 3,000 bodies generated enough heat to fog the ornate windows. Bob Marley was dying. The cancer had spread everywhere, but nobody knew yet. This was supposed to be his comeback tour, his resurrection. Instead, it would become the night his past literally walked back from the dead. At 9:23 p.m., Bob was 3 lines into running away when a figure emerged from the wings. Not rushed, not dramatic, just walking, like he belonged there. The security guard who should have stopped him was frozen, mouth open, pointing at what he was seeing. The guard, Jerome Williams, would later testify that he felt physically unable to move, like something was holding me in place, making me watch. The man was Anthony, Tony Morrison, Don Taylor's personal assistant, the one who'd supposedly died on December 3, 1976, in the house at 56 Hope Road when the gunman came for Bob. 7 bullets had allegedly torn through his body. The funeral program listed cause of death as multiple gunshot wounds to head and torso. Everyone at the funeral had seen the closed casket, mahogany with gold handles. Bob had paid extra for quality. Rita Marley had comforted his mother, holding her as she wailed, "Why, my boy?" He was just answering the door. Bob himself had given the eulogy, saying Tony died protecting what he loved: music, family, Jamaica. But there he stood, alive. His appearance was horrifying, yet mesmerizing. The left side of his face drooped from nerve damage. When he walked, his right leg dragged slightly, leaving a scraping sound that echoed through the silent theater. He was wearing the same suit he'd been buried in, black with thin pinstripes, now faded and worn. His white shirt was yellowed with age and something else, old blood stains that formed a map of violence across his chest, carrying a brown leather briefcase that would change everything. The music collapsed like a building with its foundations removed. Family Man's bass line stopped first. He'd known Tony personally, had taught him to play. Carlton's drums followed, sticks frozen mid-air. The horn section's notes died like birds hitting glass. 3,000 people watched Bob Marley's face transform from confusion to recognition, to something nobody had ever seen on his face before: pure terror. "Tony?" Bob's voice came through the microphone. Barely a whisper, but amplified across the silent theater. "You're dead. I was at your funeral." Tony Morrison kept walking toward center stage. He was thinner than before, a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, his right hand missing 2 fingers. But it was him. The walk, the way he held his shoulders, the slight limp from a motorcycle accident in 1974, all unmistakably Tony Morrison. "Hello, Bob," Tony said, his voice carrying without a microphone. "I've been dead for 4 years, 3 months, and 16 days, but not the way you think." What Tony said next made 3 people in Bob's entourage start moving toward the exits. "I know who ordered the shooting, Bob. I know, because I was supposed to die that night. Really die. Not pretend die. But I made a deal with the devil, and the devil kept his word." Bob's hands were shaking visibly now. The spotlight on him showed sweat that had nothing to do with performance. "Tony, whatever happened?" "Whatever happened?" Tony laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "I have it all here." He held up the briefcase. Signed contracts, bank transfers, recording devices, 4 years of evidence. The person who wanted you dead is standing on this stage right now. The Chicago Theater held 3,600 people, but you could hear individual heartbeats. Security started moving toward the stage, but Bob raised his hand, stopping them. His eyes never left Tony. "We should talk privately." Bob said. "No," Tony replied. That's how this started. Private talks. Secret deals. Everyone deserves to know the truth about December 3rd, 1976. Everyone deserves to know who sold Bob Marley's life for $30,000 and a visa to America. That's when somebody cut the lights. Complete darkness. Screams erupted from the audience. The sound of running feet, falling equipment, someone shouting, "Get him!" Then cutting through the chaos, Bob's voice, not amplified, but somehow reaching everyone. "Nobody move. Lights back on now." 30 seconds of chaos. 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. When the lights blazed back on, Tony Morrison was on his knees, blood running from a fresh wound on his forehead, but still clutching the briefcase. Standing over him was someone nobody expected. Alan Skill, Cole, Bob's childhood friend, his football teammate, his most trusted advisor. Skill was holding a piece of broken guitar neck like a club, raised for another strike, but frozen because 3,000 witnesses were watching, and at least 50 were already taking pictures. "Skill," Bob's voice broke. "What are you doing?" "He's lying, Bob. This man is an imposter. Tony's dead." But Tony was laughing again, blood running into his mouth. "Go ahead, Skill. Kill me again. But this time, everyone's watching." Tony struggled to his feet, never letting go of the briefcase. "Tell Bob how you met with the CIA station chief in Kingston. Tell him about the $100,000 in the Cayman account. Tell him how you gave them the layout of the house, the security schedule, when Rita would be arriving." "Lies," Skill screamed, but his hand holding the broken guitar neck was trembling. Tony opened the briefcase with his mangled hand. Papers spilled out. Photographs, documents, cassette tapes. One photograph landed face up on the stage. Skill Cole, sitting at a table, with a white man in sunglasses, sliding an envelope across. The crowd gasped. Bob picked up the photograph, stared at it, then at Skill. "This is fake," Skill said, but his voice had lost all power. "Photo manipulation. Tony's working for them, not me." What Bob Marley did next, nobody could have predicted. He walked to his guitar. A new one, not the Gibson from the 1976 shooting, picked it up and smashed it against the stage floor. Twice, 3 times. Pieces flew into the front row. Then he took the largest piece, the body of the guitar with strings still attached, and held it out to Skill. "Kill me then," Bob said. "If you tried before, finish it now. Everyone watching. No secrets." Skill dropped the broken neck he was holding. "Bob, I would never." "But you did." Bob's voice was deadly quiet. "December 3rd, you knew they were coming. You got Rita to arrive exactly when they'd be there. You made sure Don Taylor was in the kitchen. You put me in the perfect position. I was trying to protect you. They said if you did the Smile Jamaica concert, you'd die. I thought if they shot and missed, you'd cancel, you'd be safe." The confession hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Tony Morrison stood up straighter, wiping blood from his eyes. "Tell him the rest, Skill. Tell him about 1968. Everyone turned to look at Tony. 1968? That was 8 years before the assassination attempt. What could possibly? "No," Skill whispered. "Tell him about the football injury. Bob's toe. The one that never healed right." Bob's hand instinctively went to his right foot, the toe with the cancerous melanoma that was killing him. The injury, everyone said, came from a football match with Skill Cole. "It was just a game," Skill said weakly. "Just football." "There was a needle in your boot," Tony said, pulling out a medical report from the briefcase. "Radioactive copper. CIA developed it for Castro, but they tested it on Bob Marley first. 13 years for the cancer to develop. Perfect timing." Bob collapsed. Not dramatically. His legs just gave out. and he sat down hard on the stage floor. The wailers rushed forward, but he waved them off, eyes locked on his childhood friend. "Since 1968?" Bob whispered, his voice breaking like a child's. "You've been killing me since 1968?" The weight of 13 years of betrayal crashed down on him. 1968. They were 18 years old. They'd formed their first real band together. Skill had been there when Bob met Rita. He was best man at their wedding. He'd held Bob's first child before Bob himself had. They'd shared everything. Food when they were starving in Trenchtown. Dreams when they slept on studio floors. Triumph when Simmer Down hit #1. Bob's mind raced through memories now poisoned. Skill bandaging his toe after that football match, saying, "Just a bad cut, brother, you'll be fine." Skill bringing him special tea from a herbalist for energy before concerts. Skill always insisting Bob wear certain boots, eat certain foods, use specific guitars. 13 years of microdoses, 13 years of murder disguised as friendship. Skill was crying now. This huge man who'd been Bob's protector, his brother in everything but blood. Snot ran from his nose. His shoulders shook. "They said they'd kill my whole family. My mother, my sisters, my baby daughter. They showed me pictures of them through rifle scopes. Every day for a month, different locations, different guns. My 3-year-old daughter at her nursery school. A red dot on her forehead. They could reach them anywhere. So you chose my life over theirs. I thought I could control it. I thought the toe would just weaken you, make you retire. I didn't know about the cancer. I swear, Bob, I didn't know it would spread." Tony pulled out a cassette player from the briefcase. "Should we play the tape from 1979? You explaining to your handler how to increase Bob's exposure to carcinogens through his food." The sound that came from Bob Marley wasn't singing. It was something primal. 3,000 people would later describe it differently. Some said it was a scream. Others said it was a prayer in a language that doesn't exist. But everyone agreed on one thing. It was the sound of a heart breaking in real time. Peter Tosh stepped forward, his hand moving to the machete he always carried. "Say the word, Bob." "No." Bob stood up slowly, aging 10 years in 10 seconds. "No more killing. That's what they want. More blood, more violence, more excuses to say we're savages." He turned to the audience, many of whom were crying, some trying to rush the stage to get to Skill Cole, others frozen in disbelief. "You're witnessing something tonight," Bob said into the microphone. "You're witnessing how they kill us. Not with bullets, that's too obvious. They kill us with our friends, with our brothers, with time-release murder that looks like bad luck." But Tony Morrison wasn't finished. "There's more," Tony said, pulling out another document. "The shooting wasn't just about you, Bob. It was about Jamaica, about the election, about Michael Manley and socialism, but also about something else, something bigger." He held up a contract. Even from the audience, people could see official seals, government letterheads. "This is a contract between Skill Cole and the CIA, dated January 1968. But Bob, look at the witness signature at the bottom." Bob took the paper with trembling hands. "Read the name." His face went gray. "No," he whispered. "Not him too." "Who?" someone shouted from the audience. Bob looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Chris Blackwell, Island Records. My producer, my friend." He witnessed Skill's recruitment. The empire of trust collapsed entirely. Chris Blackwell, the man who'd made Bob famous, who'd produced Catch a Fire and Exodus, who'd been at every important moment of Bob's career. He'd been part of it from the beginning. Tony pulled out more papers. Blackwell was CIA from the start. Island Records was partially funded by the agency. Every revolutionary musician they signed was monitored, controlled, eventually neutralized. "Bob, You were never spreading revolution. You were being contained. Your message was being diluted, commercialized, made safe for white consumption. But the music was real. Your music was real. But they chose which songs got released, which messages got through. They turned Burnin' and Lootin' into a dance song. They made Get Up Stand Up into a concert anthem instead of a call to arms. Skill Cole suddenly made a break for the exit. He made it exactly 5 feet before the audience caught him. Not violently. Something stranger. They just surrounded him, linked arms, and created a human cage. He couldn't move without hurting innocent people. And even in his desperation, he couldn't do it. "Let him go," Bob said into the microphone. "Bob, he tried to kill you," someone shouted. "Let him go," Bob repeated. "He's already dead. He's been dead since 1968 when he sold his soul. I won't be the one to bury him." The crowd reluctantly parted. Skill looked back once at Bob, opened his mouth to say something, then walked out into the Chicago winter without a coat. He would be found 3 days later in Lake Michigan. Whether by suicide or murder was never determined. But the revelations weren't over. Tony Morrison pulled out a final item from the briefcase, a small glass vial with brown liquid inside. "This was supposed to be in your tea tonight, Bob. After the show, the final dose. Untraceable. You'd die in your sleep, and everyone would say the cancer finally won." "Who?" Bob asked. "Who was supposed to give it to me?" Tony looked around the stage at the Wailers, at the crew, at the entourage. His eyes settled on someone. "I can't," Tony said. "I've destroyed enough tonight." "Who?" Bob roared. But he never got an answer, because that's when Tony Morrison started convulsing. Foam appeared at his mouth. His eyes rolled back. He fell to the stage, body contorting in impossible angles. Someone in the audience screamed, "He's been poisoned." Dr. Marcus Chen, who'd been enjoying the concert from the 3rd row, rushed onto the stage. He checked Tony's pulse, looked at his eyes, smelled his breath. "Cyanide," he announced. "Slow-release capsule." He must have taken it before coming on stage. He knew he had about 30 minutes to live. Tony's hand grabbed Bob's shirt, pulling him close. With his last breath, he whispered something only Bob could hear. Then Tony Morrison died for the 2nd time, this time permanently. Bob stood up slowly, looking at the audience, at his band, at the body on the stage. He said, "Check the guitar," Bob announced. His last words were, "Check the guitar." Everyone looked at the smashed guitar Bob had destroyed earlier. Junior Marvin picked up the neck, examining it. Inside the hollow body, something was wedged, a small transmitter. "Every song," Bob said quietly. "Every concert, every private moment. They've been listening, recording, waiting." He turned to the Wailers. "How many of our guitars have these? How many of our hotel rooms? Our homes?" The paranoia was justified. Over the next hour, they found 17 listening devices. The concert was obviously over. But nobody left. 3,000 people sat in absolute silence as Bob Marley's crew tore apart every piece of equipment, finding bug after bug. CIA, KGB, MI6, at least 4 different agencies had been monitoring Bob Marley. At 11:47 p.m., Bob finally spoke again. "I have 4 months to live," he said simply. "Maybe less. The cancer is in my brain now. In my lungs. Everywhere. They won." "No," the crowd shouted as one. "Yes," Bob continued. "They won the battle for my body. But not for my message. Not for my music. Tony Morrison came here tonight, knowing he would die, knowing someone had already poisoned him, because he wanted the truth revealed. He wanted you all to witness what they do to anyone who truly threatens their system." He picked up an acoustic guitar, the only one without a bug, and began to play. The song he played had never been recorded, would never be recorded. It existed only in that moment. For those 3,000 witnesses, people who were there later, said it was the most beautiful and devastating thing they'd ever heard. A song about betrayal and friendship, about dying for truth and living with lies, about the price of revolution and the cost of silence. When he finished, Bob set down the guitar and spoke his final public words. They can kill a revolutionary, but they can't kill the revolution. They can silence a singer, but they can't silence the song. Tonight, you learned that Bob Marley was murdered slowly, carefully, by his best friend on orders from an empire that fears love more than hate, fears unity more than division, fears music more than guns. He looked at Tony Morrison's body, now covered with someone's coat. This man saved my soul tonight, even if he couldn't save my body. He showed me that truth is worth more than life, that revelation is worth more than reputation, that some chains can only be broken by destroying everything they're attached to. The Chicago theater erupted in tears, in rage, in something beyond applause. But Bob was already walking off stage. He would never perform again. He had exactly 112 days left to live. He spent them in Germany, trying one last treatment, knowing it was futile, but needing time to process what he'd learned. On his deathbed, May 11, 1981, Bob's last words were publicly recorded as "Money can't buy life." But nurse Ingrid Bergman, who was alone with him at the end, swears he actually said Tony was right. The guitar was always listening. The Chicago Revelation, as historians call it, was witnessed by 3,600 people, but only a handful of recordings exist. The CIA confiscated most of them within 48 hours. The official story was exhausted musician has breakdown on stage. Delusional fan disrupts concert. The Chicago Tribune ran a small item on page 17, disturbance at Marley show. But the truth survived, in whispers, in testimonies, in nightmares of those who were there. Chris Blackwell denied everything until his death in 2022. Island Records archives were mysteriously destroyed in a fire in 1983. The CIA files on Bob Marley remain classified until 2076. But there's one detail that nobody talks about, one thing that makes everything else even more chilling. Tony Morrison's mother contacted after Chicago, swore her son had visited her the night before the concert. He was healthy, happy, said he was finally free. He gave her a briefcase, different from the one he brought on stage, and told her to open it only if something happened to him. Inside were two things: a photograph of Bob Marley performing at the Smile Jamaica concert with the bandages visible on his arm, and a note in Tony's handwriting. Bob survived the bullets but not the betrayal. I survived the betrayal but chose the bullets. In the end, we're all dead men walking. The only choice is whether we die with the truth or for the truth. I chose for. Bob will have to choose with. One love doesn't mean one trust. The photograph had something circled in red. A figure in the crowd at Smile Jamaica, barely visible. It was Tony Morrison, supposedly dead 3 days, watching Bob perform. He'd been there. He'd seen Bob's triumph over the assassination. The Chicago Theater was demolished in 1986, officially for renovation that never happened, unofficially because what happened there on January 19, 1981 was too dangerous to let stand, but they couldn't demolish the memories. Every January 19th, survivors of that concert gather somewhere different. They never announce where, fearing surveillance even now. They don't speak. They just stand together for exactly 13 minutes, the length of Bob's unrecorded final song, and remember the night the dead man walked. The truth was revealed, and Bob Marley discovered that his entire life had been a managed revolution. Dr. Marcus Chen, who pronounced Tony Morrison dead, kept a secret for 40 years. In 2021, on his deathbed, he confessed, Tony's cyanide poisoning showed signs of something else, something unidentifiable, something that looked synthetic, engineered. I think Dr. Chen said, Tony Morrison was killed by remote activation. Someone at that concert had a trigger. When he'd said enough, they pressed a button. The poison was already in him, dormant, waiting. The question isn't who killed him, it's how long they let him live to serve their purpose. The briefcase Tony brought on stage was never found. It vanished during the blackout, along with most of the documents. The only evidence that survived was what people remembered, what they testified, what they couldn't forget, even when forgetting would have been safer. But the most chilling revelation came in 2019. A Freedom of Information request accidentally released one unredacted page from Bob Marley's CIA file. Most of it was blacked out, but one sentence remained visible. Subject's terminal illness proceeding as planned. Acid skill reports final phase initiated. Chicago intervention by Asset Morrison. Anticipated and acceptable. Truth revealed will be dismissed as deathbed delusion. Below that, a handwritten note. Morrison believes he's revealing truth. Doesn't know we wanted this revelation. Martyrs are more useful than revolutionaries. Dead prophets can't contradict their handlers. The implication was shattering. Tony Morrison's revelation itself had been orchestrated. His heroic truth-telling was part of the plan. Even the truth had been weaponized. Bob Marley's children have never publicly addressed the Chicago revelation. But Ziggy Marley, in a 2020 interview, said something cryptic. My father knew he was being killed slowly. He told us in 1980, trust no one who was there from the beginning. The beginning was already the end. The real tragedy isn't just that Bob Marley was murdered by his best friend on orders from intelligence agencies. It's that even the revelation of that murder might have been scripted by those same agencies. In the game of managed revolutions, even the truth becomes a lie, and the only real rebellion is to keep singing when everyone knows you're already dead. That's what Bob Marley did for his last 112 days. Sang internally, composed mentally, created music that would never be recorded because every instrument was listening, every room was bugged, every friend might be an asset. The Chicago theater's destruction in 1986 wasn't complete. One wall remained standing for 3 days before the final demolition. On it, someone had spray painted, Tony Morrison died twice for our sins. Bob Marley lived once for our souls. Skill Cole killed both and saved neither. The guitar remembers everything. By morning, the wall was gone. The graffiti artist was never found. But the message had already spread, already infected the consciousness of everyone who'd been there. Everyone who knew that on January 19th, 1981, the dead walked, the truth lied, and Bob Marley discovered that love might be one, but trust had always been zero. Somewhere in Chicago, in a safety deposit box that changes locations every year, lies the only surviving complete recording of that night. The owner, who was 17 when they bootlegged it, has never listened to it again. They say they're waiting for the right moment, when the world is ready to hear Bob Marley's heart break in real time, to hear Tony Morrison cough up engineered poison, to hear 3,000 people realize simultaneously that every revolution they'd ever believed in had been a controlled explosion designed to prevent a real fire. That moment hasn't come yet. Maybe it never will. But every January 19th, at exactly 9:23 p.m. Central Time, if you know where to listen, you can hear it. The ghost of Tony Morrison walking across a stage that no longer exists, carrying proof of crimes that were never prosecuted, revealing truths that were always lies, dying for the second time for a cause that was dead before he was ever born. The dead man walked. The truth was told. And nothing changed except everything. That's the real horror of the Chicago revelation. Not that Bob Marley was betrayed, but that his betrayal was itself orchestrated, revealed, and then erased, leaving only the echo of a song that was never recorded, sung by a man who was already dying, witnessed by people who would spend the rest of their lives wondering if what they saw was real or just another layer of control. In the end, only one thing remains certain. On January 19, 1981, at the Chicago Theater, something true happened. What that truth meant, who controlled it, and whether it was ever really true at all, those questions died with Tony Morrison's second death and Bob Marley's first. The revolution was televised after all. It just wasn't the revolution. It was the revelation that there had never been a revolution, only the illusion of one, managed by the same hands that managed its exposure. One love, one lie, one life, twice taken. That's the algebra of assassination in the age of controlled resistance.